So let's start today's video with some nostalgia, some early 80s nostalgia, some early 80s rock, glam and metal nostalgia. So on the 1st of June 1981, issue 1 of Kerrang comes out. On page 34 are Venom, soon to change their name, and the legendary Silverwing. So that's June 1981, Kerrang issue 1. Fast forward to 1983, we have this album, a classic, Alive and Kicking by Silverwing. Now you may notice this has been vandalised on the front by a Stuart Macfarlane and an Alistair Macfarlane. So today's interview is with Alistair Macfarlane, formerly of Silverwing, and then Pet Hate, 2 Pet Hate albums, and a solo artist as well. So Alistair will be telling us about his time in Silverwing, his time in Pet Hate, touring with bands like Diamond Head and Hanoi Rocks. If you can believe that, they toured with Hanoi Rocks and Diamond Head. So a huge thank you to Alistair for doing this interview. Now, full disclosure here, like I do know Alistair, I met Alistair in the 2017, I think it was the first time, when he signed my album. And I have done a couple of albums with Alistair, so I do know him pretty well. But he took the time out of his hectic schedule. He does a lot of recording, he still does tons of recording. He took time out of his schedule to do this interview with me the other day. So thank you, I do hope you enjoy it. It was very much fun to do it and hear the stories that Alistair has from back in the day. Alistair, how are you?
I'm super. Actually, we were just, I was going to say, because the last 3 days, and you'll understand this, have been dreich.
Dreich?
In the pure sense of the word, it was just horrible. And I'd rather it snowed, to be honest. So. I'll
need to put something in my video that says dreich, an explanation for the non-Scots.
Exactly.
Amongst us. So just to clarify, you are currently located in
Mississauga, Ontario, Canada. I'm about 30 minutes drive or train ride from downtown Toronto. So, yeah.
And I'm all the way on the other side of the Atlantic in Edinburgh, where it was snowing earlier for the first time this year.
I saw that actually online. A couple of friends of mine in Greenock, the town I was born in, were putting up videos and pictures of it snowing there. Quite bad too, actually. So I don't know.
I think Greenock's normally quite bad. I think that's so. My comprehensive show notes and question schedule begins here. So Alistair, your musical journey, and I'm talking about even before guitar playing. When did you become aware of music? When did you take it in and think, I like music? What was the first sort of things that you like?
I don't know. I started playing the drums for some reason about 8 years old. I started banging around on biscuit tins and stuff like that. And I honestly don't know why. I mean, my mom and dad used to play a lot of music. I think the album that probably still shapes me to this day is the Carpenters' Greatest Hits. I think that's where I learned love and melody and everything, and probably her drumming. I don't know. I just started to play the drums, biscuit tins, and farting around. And then I discovered T-Rex, and obviously that took things in a different direction. I think it was about 10 years old. And then the whole thing about our musical family is like we did not know that my dad was a musician. We had no idea, not a clue. So we started playing and doing that stuff ourselves. And it was only when we moved to Kendal in the Lake District, Northern England, that he met another guy that he knew from back when he was a teenager playing bebop jazz in Greenock. Don't know how that happens, but so this guy invited him along to like a jam session. It was called the Brewery Arts Center every Sunday from 12 to 2. And he says, well, I don't have a saxophone. He says, well, just come along. And the next thing, he's buying a saxophone, he's playing, and then we're going along and watching, and the drummer's letting me get up on his drums and bash around when I was 10, and I don't want to say this sound like an asshole, but I was naturally gifted. I was never taught to play anything. Um, so I just picked it up, and then picked up the guitar and the bass and everything. And obviously my brother Stuart was started to play the guitar and the bass, and we just kept going.
So, but you left the bebop jazz world behind for.
No, I didn't. No, I remember I sort of mentioned it to you. I actually played drums for my band, my dad's big band, jazz band. But that's all. It was all reading, right? You're reading parts, you're reading stuff. Like there's no improv. But I think I'd heard the majority of the songs that my dad had played over the years. Tommy Dorsey, Glenn Miller, that kind of stuff. That the parts were just a guide for me, to be honest.
So you start off on drums, and then what age do you get your first guitar?
That couldn't tell you for sure. I think Stuart had them before I did. I don't think I honestly got my first real guitar until I was probably 16. I think I was mainly playing drums. I mean, I was playing drums a lot because when I was about 13, my dad got a phone call from this guy called Martin Smith, who was a country singer. He needed a drummer, and he thought that Stuart was the drummer because he was older and he wanted to play in a pub. My dad said, "No, it's my younger son." And he says, "Well, can he play?" My dad said, "Sure." So I did my first gig when I was 13 in a pub playing drums.
What was your first guitar then? Can you remember?
Yes, I had to look it up. I told you. It was an Aria Pro 2 FC1500. I'll have to check. I have my notes here. Because all I could remember, it was like I remember it was a weird guitar because there was only two knobs, right? A volume and a tone. And it still had a three-way switch. So you couldn't do that, thing with the toggle switch. Because it never turned the one pickup off. So where were we? Let me see.
It was a PE
50, yeah, PE 1500, which I think was released that year, 78. I think I got one brand spanking new.
Those are nice guitars. I mean, even now they command a good price to buy one of them now.
Yeah, I've seen them go for what? I think $2,000 for a thing. Oh, I never.
Do you still have it?
No. Yeah, that one I don't. Yeah, I think that was the problem. Was the fact that you could not go between the bridge and the neck pickup. Right, you were either bridge, both, neck, right? So there was no in between because, like I say, it was just one volume control, one tone control. So I think after the first tour, then I bought the Ibanez Iceman, and the thing about that was that's the only guitar I ever regret selling. It was and I don't know why I did, but I did. But I think it was the original black one, but somebody had stripped it. So if you see, you can't see some of the pictures where it looks blonde, like it's the actual wood underneath. Yeah. There was no covering on it. Like, because I've looked up pictures when I see, like, you look for an Iceman blonde, but they're a solid blonde. They're not like a wood blonde. And that's what this was. So I think somebody had actually stripped it. But maybe. I loved it. It was great. Beautiful guitar, great action, nice neck, sounded fantastic. And then I think I traded it in for a BC Rich.
So you get your Aria, and then when's the first band, and at what point does that band become Silverwing? What's the
trajectory? Well, I think what happened was Stuart, my brother, originally was in Silverwing to start. I think they'd gone from being a wannabe Styx pomp band, which I don't know if you've heard any of the early demos or not, but they're pretty funny. They're pretty funny. And then for some reason they sort of wanted to be more like sort of Kiss, Triumph sort of stuff. So I think Stuart just did the usual, answered an ad in the Melody Maker or Sounds or something. And So he was the one that started, and then I guess it was 1980, late 1980, where he said you should come down. Like, we're looking for another guitar player. You should come down. So I did, and uh, then I was number two, the number two Macfarlane in Silverwing, and I think this kind of goes throughout from when I started to when I left after the Morph and the Pet Hate. That they didn't really. I don't think they ever had a direction ever. It was. It always seemed to be, let's jump on what's happening. Um, and I think the irony is because Steve and Dave Roberts, I guess there's two things here. Steve and Dave Roberts, who were brothers, um, when I joined, so there was Steve and Dave Roberts, Stuart and Alistair Macfarlane, two sets of brothers. But for some reason, they didn't think that would be a good idea. I'm like, it just seemed like a perfect kind of marketing thing to do, right? You have two sets of brothers. But no, so that's when they said, well, maybe you should, get a different surname, if you're going to do some singing and stuff. So I literally went through the phone book, and why I chose Alistair Terry to this day, I will never know.
On a timeline, like just to say there, so that was late 1981. So in
80.
late 1980.
Yeah.
So, but in that, fast forward a mere 6 months, and you're in the first issue of Kerrang.
Yes.
How did that happen? Who do you know?
I don't know. This story, I don't know. I don't think I want to go too in depth with this, but
That's okay. It's okay.
Geoff Barton, who people know.
For my viewers, I'll just put this on.
Oh, and there's Ian Burke above in Rocks. I know. Good old Ian. He's a good friend. Yeah, Geoff Barton, for some reason, I think I know the reason, but sort of glommed onto us. I think it was more to do with Steve than anything. So I don't know, but it was Geoff Barton, who was the one somehow. I think even before I was there, but I think, I think with the sort of change of direction, like I said, that that's what happened. Yeah, how we ended up there, I don't know. Because I'm sort of going to preface a lot of this by saying a lot of the decisions of the band, because it was Steve and Dave's band, I don't know how a lot of things actually happened. I was just kind of there. I was just the talent, Dunsy, the talent. So
everything happens at night, as you say. Everything. So is that why Geoff ended up writing a couple of songs as well, or the lyrics?
Flashbomb Fever, if I remember, had something to do with Geoff. Yeah, because and Dave Roberts too, who was the bass player, was a journalism student, and then, as you know, went on to write for Sounds. I don't know. I honestly, for a lot of that stuff, I don't know how it happened, why it happened. I was just kind of happy that, again, I think the difference to be playing in front of audiences and playing mainly original material was, for anybody, was a lot more exciting. I mean, you made your money cover band, right? But to do that was yeah, it was, I don't know, fuck me, I was like 18 years old, and I don't know if I was living the dream, but it was pretty close, for sure.
I believe this was recorded at the Sulphur Glam Festival, Manchester, April 1983. Do you remember much about the Sulphur Glam Festival? People are still talking about it.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun. I remember that. And I think I remember it was the first time that I ever seen Sacred Alien with Sean Canning, Sean, who I've been friends with online for some time. And then I saw him a year or two later. He sort of done another band called White Trash, who were great. And Sean was a. I mean, to be honest, out of everybody on that night, I think Sean stood out the most because he was just a good frontman. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of. I don't think there was. You don't usually, and too, when you're on bill with a few bands, and there's always that kind of bullshit animosity, we're better than them crap that goes on. And I think that was more, like I said, I think the funniest thing I remember was people tugging on Rocky Shade's wig to see if his hair was real. But yeah, it was good.
So you do Alive and Kicking. What bands are you going out and playing with, like on tour around about that time as well?
We did some gigs with, obviously the Diamond Head tour, which is, the big one. That was in 1981. We did a gig with Roy Wood in London.
No, no way, at Christmas.
No, it was middle of bloody summer. I remember. I can't remember where it was. It was in London, and it was hot as fuck. I remember that, and I actually passed out on stage for about 30 seconds and sort of came back. But Roy Wood, after that, when Silverwing moved into Pet Hate, we did about 4 gigs with Phil Lynnett's Grand Slam.
Oh yeah. See, just to go back there a bit, the Diamond Head tour, that was 1981.
Yeah.
And that was like a UK tour of sort of bigger venues, I think.
Yeah, well, we were doing, I guess what would be considered normal size, like Manchester Free Trade Hall, stuff like that. And a few of the things, there's quite a few stories from that tour, but I did reach out to a few people in the last day or two to get some clarity on some of the details, that I don't remember. But yeah, again, how we got that tour, I do not know. I just remember that the next thing, we're going on the road. Both the bands were unsigned at the time. So it was a tour with 2 unsigned bands that had records out and were playing those kind of venues. So it was pretty unusual for those days. So yeah, it was really 3 weeks. I think 3-week tour. Yeah, so we also West Runton.
West Runton.
I don't know where that is.
The legendary.
Bradford.
The legendary West Runton.
Yes, Bradford, Blackburn, Stourbridge, Hanley, Taunton, Swindon, Manchester, Warrington, Lincoln, Edinburgh, Liverpool, Sheffield, Workington, Bristol, Portsmouth, Banbury, and Woolwich. So there.
How was that tour for you? I mean, well, just a question first. What backline were you using at that point to play these bigger venues?
Just the Marshall 50 combo. It was a great sounding app. I remember that. I don't recall what Stuart was using at the time. I think he was definitely using a Strat, but I don't know from an app point of view what he was using. But yeah, that's all we needed, to be honest. So here's the thing with Diamond Head was they were all great guys. Tatler, not so much. He was nice enough, but he was just kind of a snobby standoff. Just didn't really talk to anyone, but that's fine, whatever. But the thing was, what they used to sound check for fucking hours. Like literally, they would finish sound checking literally as the doors would open. So practically every night we're bringing stuff on stage, right? And we've got a couple of guys who were sort of roadies. John Williams, who I actually chatted with earlier to clear something up. Mark Linus, a couple of guys. So, they were dragging the stuff on stage and we were literally like playing half an hour later. So we hardly ever got to sound check, like hardly ever. So it was kind of a strange thing because every time during their sound check, they played the song Red Barchetta by Rush. Fucking endlessly they played that song. And
were they just trying to get it right?
I don't know. I don't know if they just really liked it, but it was never Sean. Sean was never there, like the singer. He was always off somewhere else. So it was just the 3 of them. And they just went on and on and on. And this was every day. Like it wasn't just once or twice. Like it was every day. So the one day we were in Taunton, I think. Taunton, it was down south England, that kind of Somerset thing, accent. And like literally, the same thing guys are hauling the stuff on. So Mark, who was one of the guys, so the sound guys tell him to do the drum check, right? Like kick, kick, snare, snare, do, right? So he's doing that, no problem. And then he says, just play the whole kit, right? And Mark couldn't play the drums. He had no idea. He's like flailing around on this thing. And because there's literally half the crowd were there already, some guy shouts out, I can't play drums either. And it was just, I remember that one to this day. It was one of the funniest things ever. So, and that was kind of what it went every night. I think all in all, I mean, like I say, to play all those venues and to have good crowds every night. I mean, if they weren't sold out, they were close to.
So how does Silverwing end and then Pet Hate begin?
I honestly don't know. I honestly don't remember the reasoning behind it. I don't know. I think it was probably, so we're going to go back to when Dave Roberts, who was doing journalism at the time, and I think that where it started was I picked up the first Hanoi Rocks album. So I got Shake's Hanoi Rocks. Sorry, Alba. Doug's. And I picked that up. And I went, wow, this is really cool. Like, I really liked it. I was just, this is such a good album. And it just sort of came out of nowhere. And I think it was our local record shop in Kendall. There was a guy there. He was either Johnny Smythe or somebody. But they'd said to me, you might like this. And they showed it to me. And the cover was great. I looked at the back and all these guys look great. I'm in, right? So, and I took that and played it to Dave Roberts and said, listen to this, right? It's kind of different, but not, right? But it's different enough that it's not really heavy rock. It's not really punk. It's sort of, good songs, well played. And I think that's where they started again. All of a sudden they went, oh, maybe we should do something like this. And obviously then the name changed and stuff. But what happened in the interim to that was that Dave actually got to go to Finland. And he was the first British writer to actually have an interview and a written piece about Hanoi Rocks in the British press. Actually my good friend, bandmate, songwriter guy now, Andrew, who's my neighbor, which I'll do that quick story. When I first met him about 5 years ago, finds out he's from Newcastle, finds out his favorite band's Hanoi Rocks, and he would have seen me play in 1984 in Newcastle. So anyway, just strange. And now he lives down the street.
Did he ask for his money back?
He should have. And I think that's where it started, was this like, well, let's, sort of change our image a little bit. And I think that's when they realized that the songs that I was writing were probably a bit more akin to what Hanoi Rocks were doing.
To me, like if I put this against the like
classic,
the Pet Hate albums, it is a classic. It's a classic. There's more songwritery.
Yes.
That's a funny sort of way.
Yeah.
These are songwritery songs.
Yeah.
Whereas these are just are songs that are good. I mean, I love the album, as I've told you many times. I love the album, but this seemed like a step forward to, we've got a guy who's a songwriter in now, and he's writing some songs as opposed to just playing some song.
Yeah, exactly. And and that's what happened.
So who do you then go into gigs with Pet Hate?
Mainly Hanoi Rocks. 84 was the big summer tour we did with Hanoi Rocks.
How was hanging out with the Hanoi guys?
Great, awesome. They were so cool. I mean, I just I sort of knew Nick, I guess Razzle, a little bit before that, but I mean, they were the same age as us, right? I mean, they were only in their early 20s, and they'd already been pretty big in like Finland and stuff for almost 3 years at that point, I think. But yeah, they weren't the complete messes I think they're portrayed to be. They were actually, I think the only one that was actually kind of a real mess most of the time was Andy McCoy.
I think he still is by all accounts.
Mike was a great guy. Mike actually borrowed my amp a couple of times because he was just starting to learn to play guitar at that point. Nasty was great. Sammy was great. Razzle was fantastic. But it was fun. I was a lot of fun. That was 3 weeks debauchery. I think pretty much it was great. I mean, it was the summer too. I think the funniest show on that night, there was a place I don't know if you've ever been to, called Raleigh, not where Fred lives, but Raleigh in England. So I remember we showed up. It was hot, and it was like in the middle of the afternoon, and we sort of walked in to go like set up and everything like that, and there was no one there. The place was wide open, right? There was no one there, and we're like, okay, well, we'll just set up anyways. Like we're on the poster for the night. So we ended up. Me for sure. Was Mickey in the band at the time? Probably. So me, Mickey, Steve and Dave didn't drink, so they weren't involved. So it was me, Mickey, Mike, Andy, Nasty, most of the guys from Hanoi Rocks just ended up helping ourselves to the bar. Literally for 3 hours, maybe. And that night was a bit of a disaster, to say the least. I remember we opened with the song "The Bride Wore Red" was our opening song, and I think we had to play that intro for about a minute till I could even remember what the words were. And once I got started, it was great. But and we were bad, but Hanoi was worse. They were just terrible that night. I mean, and they were a superb live band, but I think even they were so out of it by the time they went on stage. It was just a disaster.
After the Hanoi tour, because then the next time I see you, like, is on ECT, on like national television, which I think was at the end of, it was 85, I think.
Summer again. It was definitely in the middle of 85. Because it was. Oh, maybe it was early 85. It was early 85 because I know in the summer of 85 we actually came to Canada. We did a couple of shows here in Toronto.
Right.
We did the legendary Rock and Roll Heaven in downtown Toronto. We did a place called the Gasworks, which is probably even more legendary, and a place called Larry's Hideaway. So it's like three sort of notable venues in Toronto. And we'd already done ECT because I remember being in, I think, Rock and Roll Heaven and them showing like the record radio part on their TVs in the club that we were coming the next night or something. So we'd obviously already done it at that point. So it was definitely earlier in the year, but ECT was done in London somewhere. I could not tell you where it was. And I cannot tell you how we ended up on it either. So again, that was part of the whole decision-making process. I just showed up.
So how does Pet Hate end? Does it end in acrimony, fistfights, and legal challenges?
No, I wish it had ended up in fistfights. No. So what happened was, during the 85 thing when we were here in Canada, because that was actually my third time in Toronto. My first time in Toronto was 1982. I came with my late friend Chris Ellis, purely to see the band Toronto. You know, back then, see how you think about it these days? It's like you can find it on the internet. We must have been in Sounds. It must have been in something that Toronto were touring the summer of 82. And they were playing Massey Hall. And I said to my friend Chris, because we were big fans, like, we should go. And we ended up, remember when they used to do pen pals in Kerrang at the back?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
So I saw this guy in Toronto, so I started pen paling because, of course, I want somewhere free to stay, right? I'm not fucking spending money in hotels. So we go back and forth, and we actually end up in Toronto that summer, me and my friend, and this guy Gary. It was like a dream come true. We'd ended up, and he's driving a Trans Am, right? It was like, this is just, I've just fucking died and gone to heaven, right? I'm in a Trans Am.
Yeah.
And but then he tells me, his dad doesn't want you guys to stay at our house. And I'm like, okay, problematic. He goes, well, we'll go and see these other guys. So I'm going to give a shout out to this guy, Dan Dunedin, and his family, who took me and my friend Chris in back then. We're still friends. And, it was great. So we went to see Toronto, and the Headpins were the opening band. So I got to see two great bands in 1982 that, these days people will kill. I think Derby still does stuff, though. Toronto do too. But anyway, so that was then. Then I came back in 1984, which we can get to if we're going to talk about my classic solo album. But
yeah, of course.
So then in 85, I remember we were going around, we were doing these shows. And, at the time, I mean, you got to remember Toronto at that time. And you had bands like Santers and Coney Hatch. I can't remember the amount of bands we saw in like a week that were just really good. Mm-hmm. And I remember getting back after that. And I think we were sort of, who knows what was going to happen, because we'd done Bad Publicity, the second album. And I just, I'd done my solo album. And I remember just saying to Dave one day, I go, I don't want to be a dick about this, but we're not going anywhere with your brother on drums. And that was the end. And Steve came to me the next day or two later and said, you're not in the band anymore. I'm like, okay, whatever.
Thank you.
Yeah, but no, I mean, and it's true. And I don't care. I mean, you're probably the same as me. I think most musicians, it's hard to listen to your band the way other people do. It's impossible. You can't. And I still don't. I mean, I can listen to those albums and go, like, the drumming is not bad, but it's just pedestrian. It's average. There's no feel to it. And I think that was the thing with Steve. He just didn't have a feel that you should have as a good drummer. And, because the songs sort of plodded along. There wasn't a lot of, movement or whatever. And, I mean, being a drummer myself, I was kind of frustrating. And I honestly said,
I can imagine, yeah.
Dave was turning into a good bass player. He had great stage presence. We had good songs. It was all there. But to be honest, Steve just wasn't that good. And then something happened after that. I mean, nothing to do with Pet Hate, but for me, about a year later. But where I discovered that I was producing and writing for this American girl called Tiger with a Y. She was just good looking, amazing stage presence, but couldn't sing really. So I got roped into it, and I was getting paid for it, so I didn't really care. But so they wanted to do some gigs, so I actually had to put a band together for the first time, where I actually had to put ads in papers and stuff and go looking for a bass player, looking for a drummer. But I actually, but I was the one that got to pick who it ended up being, right? It was no one else's decision but mine. So, I got a really good drummer and a really good bass player. And it was just the three of us. I was playing guitar. And right then I'm like, if these guys could see it or understand it now, like how I got to pick who was good. And it was a great band. I mean, it was just a three-piece band and her wailing over top of it, but it was a really fucking good band. I mean, these guys could play.
When did the legendary solo album come out? And how did it come about that you did the solo album if you're still in Pet Hate at that point as well?
Well, so 1984, my second trip to Toronto, with me and my friend Chris, we were just here hanging out. I wrote a ton of songs, tons. When I came back from Toronto to the UK, I had 80 songs maybe written. And it was the songs were being picked at the same time for Bad Publicity and my solo album. So I had this basically, tons of music. And then, so Roger Bowden, who owned the Cottage Recording Studios where we did both the albums, sadly passed away a year or two ago. He said to me that he says, I think a lot of the songs that they haven't picked for Bad Publicity are better he goes, "Do you want to do a solo album?" I'm like, "Okay." He goes, "So,
Mm.
you don't pay for it. There's no money changes hands. We'll just record when there's time, right? So late at night, whenever weekends, whenever he wasn't actually have clients in there." So we recorded over a period of about a year. And yeah, I played everything on it practically. I think James did a guitar solo. And because it was called Young at Heart, but it's spelled Yonge, Young, which is the
Yeah.
longest street in the world, maybe, or Canada, anyways. So it's Yonge Street in Canada, which starts at Lakeshore, Lake Ontario, bottom of Toronto. So that's why it's called Young at Heart, because every song on that album was written either in Toronto or just after I got back. And
Right.
so, yeah, I mean, there's a song called Center Island on there, which is about Center Island in Toronto. But Roger just said, "Let's do an album." And I'm like, okay. And that probably honestly didn't help with the way things ended, because it sold more than any of the Pet Hate albums, both put together. And I was getting a lot of, good press from that album too. And I can still listen to that album. Like I obviously, like anything you go back and listen to, you're like, holy shit, I'd do that different. But you can't. But that I can honestly listen to without going, oh God, right? I think the songs are good. I think it sounds great. I think that legacy thing is important, just from and even to this day. I mean, that's why for me, The Bride Wore Red, for instance, is an album I can never listen to ever again, because it sounds like shit. That's the one. Some of the songs are great. I mean, same thing.
Was the demo better?
Probably. I would imagine it probably was. But I mean, it's a horrible sounding album. I mean, let's be fair. It's not.
It's not high fidelity.
Yeah, but again, so here's the thing. We sort of go back to what you were saying before. It was just like, okay, these guys, this is an engineer. He knows what he's doing. But then all of a sudden, when you get the band input, which I think at that time was Steve and Dave saying, we should do this, we do this. But again, I don't think they understood how it worked. It's just like, and Rogers at the time is just getting paid. He's just fucking pushing sliders and going, sure, you want that? Right? And obviously, and the difference was with Bad Publicity, the second album, was we got a well-known producer in Eddie Leonetti from, what was he, Moxie, Angel, Legs Diamond.
How did that come about?
Good question. I don't know. I think I remember, because he sort of disappeared off the face of the earth a little bit after the Angel albums. I think because he did after Sinful, and then I think he had something to do with the live album, Live Without a Net. And I think Steve had sent a letter to like Sunset Sound or somewhere in LA, and I think got the phone call. Right, so
Crazy.
Yeah, it was literally like reaching out by letter to see if he'd even be interested. And I guess maybe he just wanted a trip to Macclesfield. I don't know. Wouldn't we all? Yeah, but it was good. I mean, and we did we did a couple of weeks kind of pre-production stuff, which was fucking unheard of for us at the time.
Yeah.
Apart from demos and stuff, but still. But that's, again, where it came in as far as picking the songs.
So after Pet Hate, at what point do you end up in Canada then? And like I know you took a break from doing a lot of stuff for a while. At what point does Pet Hate end? You're in Canada, and then you're taking a break from doing the music business.
So in '85, when we were here, when we were doing the shows in Toronto, the night we were supposed to do the Gasworks in Toronto, we showed up and there was no PA there. So who should show up in the building but Greg Godovitz from famous trio. Anyway, so Greg Gonovitz ended up making a few phone calls, getting a PA system thing, because the clubs that they did at that time didn't have their own PA, a lot of them, right? You actually had to bring it. So he got a PA system, blah, blah, blah. And, I remember me and Greg, got on really well. And we exchanged phone numbers and stuff. So, so after the conversation of we need a new drummer, Dave, and me getting kicked out of the band, I remember getting a call from Greg Gonovitz. Said he wanted to put a band together, because at that time I think Gino was a guitar player, Doug was a drummer. I think they'd sort of all fallen out. But he still wanted to do some touring, and he wanted a guitar player, singer to come on tour with him. So I said sure, and I ended up back here in '86, and toured Western Canada with Greg Gonovitz. And I just stayed here illegally at first, but then I applied for landed immigrant status. But the difference was then is like, even though I was granted it, I still had to come back to the UK and then come back to Canada. So that's how that happened. So I continued playing stuff, and I actually got into doing covers, actually, with a guy called Donnie Armstrong, who's a great singer, piano player. And ended up doing basically duo, doing the classic lounge hotel stuff, but getting paid a bundle of money to do it. All covers, but it was kind of a bit more obscure, bit better. So I did that for 3 years, which basically allowed me to buy a house, quite honestly. My first wife, Shiraz, around that time, 1990. We got married in 93. Bought our first house in 93 for $851,000 in a really good neighborhood too, which I sold 6 years ago for $850,000. So, anyway, so we were together for a while. Shiraz unfortunately had ovarian cancer. She got cancer diagnosed in 2000, and she passed away in 2004. And when we were married, it was actually when I completely stopped. I completely stopped doing anything. I didn't write. I didn't record. I did nothing. Literally nothing. I mean, not literally. I did nothing with music at all. I just completely quit.
Did you think you needed a break, or did you weren't inspired, or just circumstances weren't right?
No, I honestly thought that we were going to be married for the rest of our lives and going to have kids and settle down, and and that was going to be my life. I'd done a lot of work, sort of not engineering, but I was doing a lot of handyman stuff. I was always good with that, and ended up working for a company that was doing a lot of work for big companies like Bell Canada and Workers' Compensation Board of Ontario. And I got in with this company doing that, which was good. And I thought that was it, right? This is going to be my life. And I was quite happy with that. I didn't honestly at any time felt that I needed to get back into music at all. Never. I know it sounds weird, and looking back on it seems weird to me, but I honestly had nothing. I was like, this is great. This is perfect. That's what I want to do. I'm in a really nice house in a really nice neighborhood, got a beautiful wife, and I got money, so why should I throw it away? I don't know, maybe that's what I thought. But after she passed away, it took a couple of years, but one day I actually tore the muscle in my leg walking down the flight of stairs. And I was at home for 3 months. And of course, I can't go anywhere. What the fuck am I going to do? So, and I had a Mac at the time, I had a laptop, and I kept hearing about this garage band thing. I was like, maybe I should give that a shot. But it was back then that I thought, maybe I should give it a shot. And then I didn't do anything for a couple of years, and then all of a sudden I started writing again, just because I thought, well, it just seems kind of silly for me to do nothing. Now I've got time. And when I started writing again, I think what was funny for me at the time was the songs were so bad. Like you forget, it's like you forget how to write. Right? I'm sure. I don't know if it happens for other people, but I was like, I'd literally forgotten how to write a song. I was making everything so overly complicated and like instead of just writing. So it took a couple of years. Plus, I had to get my voice back in shape because I hadn't sang for almost 15 years. So it took me a while to get back into that kind of shape. But then once I started, it was fun. And then I got back into the whole reason why I like recording and creating is taking that 4 minutes of something and making it into something that people can listen to. When we met was 2018. Yeah, it was 2018. And I think it was the following year where you'd contact me and said, I got a couple old songs. Should we do those? And I'm like, sure. And that was fun.
I think it was. I've got a couple of really rubbish old songs. Could you make them any better? I think was what it was.
But but to this day, my wife Linda loves that album, that first All's Done album. I think it has something that's just, I don't know what it is. The songs are great. I mean, it's just a good album.
So your latest project is Alba Burke. So when did that start? About three years
ago?
Yeah,
3 years ago. Yeah. So what happened? Like I say, we go back originally when I first met Andy, and then about a year later, because he'd bought a copy of the first All's Done album. I remember that, and then it was maybe a couple of months after that he said, "I've got some songs. Would you mind giving them a mix?" Right? And I'm like, "Sure." And it was a sort of a project he was working with someone else. And then all of a sudden he was like, I think he just started sending me songs to go, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? And at first probably the first couple of months, I'm like, it's okay. Then he sent me one. I'm like, I really like this. So I started working on it and he loved what I did with it. And then we just went from there. And again, it's fun because the only thing I actually have to physically do is sing. I write the lyrics, but I don't have to play at all, which I kind of like. I'm complete opposite of you. I don't like doing it, but I like the creating and the melody and all that stuff. So the playing part is all done by him. I don't have to do anything like that. The drums are all, they're not technically programmed, but looped or programmed. But I do a lot of work with the drums. I do all the keyboards. I do the singing. And I kind of just wanted to get back to probably what we talked about an hour and a half ago is like just pop music, like not like the Carpenters, but just basic pop songs, right? And just being able to just have no kind of boundaries or limits or stuff. We're not trying to be experimental. We just want to write good pop songs.
I was going to say. It's very sort of melodic.
Mm-hmm.
Just the whole thing. It's funny you should say how we kind of started with the Carpenters and you've kind of ended up with it because it has that real sort of melody all about it.
Yeah, and that's what I've always been. And I think again we go like back to Pet Hate with the Bad Publicity, which had some really good songs on it. That with more money, probably in more time, there were some great songs on there, and they're not really any different to what I'm doing now. They, you listen to Girls Grow Up Too Fast, or I'm Not the One, or Stale Lipstick's on that one. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But those kind of songs were just pop songs, right? That's all they were. I wasn't trying to do anything different, and that's never changed. It'll never change. I want it, and you're the same. You want the postman to be able to hum your song, right?
I'll put all the links to the Alba Burke stuff down in the description.
Don't forget the old.
Yes, yeah.
The two,
of course. They're always done.
I have a few left. People are looking for them.
Alistair, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. It's been a pleasure, as it always is, speaking to you, and a pleasure working with you as well. And it's still a pleasure for me to listen to those albums. I've got to say, I've loved those albums since I was a young kid.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, it's great. I was great when we met. It was like 5 years ago. Yeah. So it's always fun. Like we said before, it's always fun to meet people who've listened to you differently than you have. And, to meet fans is still to this day mind-boggling to me that people actually liked what we did. But, it's great.
People like this. People like this so much they bought it.
Yeah, and to me, to this day, when I get things for the All's Done albums, we have CDs and stuff people would purchase, and it still blows my mind that people will go out their way to do it, right? Because you don't have to these days if you don't want to. So back then it was great, and I've always appreciated meeting people who are fans, and I've done that in the past. Guys like Stephen Rowlands from Liverpool, Keith Lawrenson, David Lindsay, bunch of people that I've met in the last 5 years who've shown up, actually come from another town to just have a drink with me, still is mind blowing to me. And I really super appreciate that stuff. And I think a lot of people don't. I'm sure some guys do, but it's always it's an honor, and it's kind of flattering to be thought of as that, and because I've never thought of myself that way at all, ever. It wasn't what I wanted to be or do, but it's great, and I super appreciate it, always do. So thank you so much.